I'd like to talk today about how you actually go about writing a novel. How do you do that? I mean, what steps do you take? And I can tell you that essentially the process is very similar. I mean, you can look at any number of YouTube videos or books on Amazon, and you basically get the same thing, right? You need a story idea and some characters and some plot points, and you put it all together and start off with a first draft and then do some revisions, and at the end of it all you have a novel. And effectively that's what it is. I mean, there are different tweaks you can do to it, but essentially that's what you need to know, and that's how you do it. And then the more novels you write, the better you get at it, and sooner or later you come across a story that you really enjoy, that you've written well, and that resonates with readers. But today I want to talk to you about a counterintuitive approach to writing. So it's not it's not what you would learn in other places necessarily. So let's outline a couple of things about this. So typically what we do when we want to write a novel is we sit down and we come up with some story ideas and unique characters, and we pick a genre, think up a basic story, and then sit down at the kitchen table and start writing. And that's typically what happens for many aspiring novelists. But then, as you know, if you've tried this, bad things can happen. Just as an example, you realize, wait a second, my characters and my story ideas aren't really that unique, and it's been done before, and so on and so forth. And then the initial excitement of starting the project dwindles as the obstacles mount. And this is typically what happens if you're not skilled at wordsmithing and story structure and so on. And then the writing gets really hard, and it's not fun anymore, and we quit. And then what can often happen, is the shame spiral begins, where you start telling yourself that you're a terrible human being and everyone hates you and you're worthless and there's no point to writing because your books are always going to suck and this is really bad. So we want to avoid that kind of thing. But the typical way of writing a story, it goes like this, right? You think up your story idea, you create some so-called unique characters, and then you just start writing by the seat of your pants. You get stuck, so you start rewriting, scratching things out, deleting stuff. Then you get stuck again, and you keep writing, and you get more rewrites, and it just gets worse and worse and worse until finally you lose interest, and then you feel bad, and you quit. Perhaps a bit of time goes past, and that muse in your head is starting to say, hey, you've got a story to tell, and so you start again, and you build some characters, and you start writing by the seat of your pants, and then you get stuck, and then you do rewrites, and so on and so forth, until you lose interest, you feel bad again, and you quit. So this is the endless cycle of starting and quitting and starting again when it comes to writing a story. Now, most of us have dreamed of writing a novel since childhood, or from our teenage years anyway, but most of us never get it done. And there are a lot of reasons for that. One is certainly knowledge, like how do you actually do this? Another is skill, right? Writing a story is a craft. And that takes time to develop and to learn, and there's no shortcut to gaining experience with this. So those are those things, and then there are the psychological reasons, right? Like the fear of actually doing this and putting it out into the world and getting some bad reviews, and maybe feeling that you're being judged by others. So all of those things add together, and they compound, and and can lead you to quitting before you ever really get started. Now, if you want to write a novel, here's the counterintuitive approach that I use. If you want to write a novel, it's not about focusing on the writing. It's about focusing on the planning and the testing. So what do I mean by that? What's the focus on planning and testing? I mean, writing a novel is about writing a novel. But this is how it works. Look, you wouldn't build a house or go on a vacation without a plan. Like, you have to think these things through, right? Like, too often, just as an example in our careers, sometimes we just don't think about the career. You just jump at the next shiny object that's out there, and before you know it, you're enslaved by a mortgage and a car loan and kids and so on and so forth, and you hate your job, and life is ugly and you don't want to go there. So planning things out becomes really important. And here's the truth. Like, the truth to all of this is that the more you plan in advance, the more you test your ideas, the easier and more enjoyable the writing becomes. So instead of getting an idea, sitting down and starting your writing and then getting frustrated with it, let's think it out a bit. Let's take our time, think things out, test some ideas, and have fun with the process, not put so much pressure on ourselves. Now, some of you may be saying, hey, wait a second, what about, writing by the seat of your pants? I mean, Stephen King says to do this, and he does this, and many successful authors do this. They'll come up with their ideas, they'll come up with their characters, and then they organically grow the story from there, where their characters take on lives of their own and start doing things on their own, and so on and so forth. And yes, that's viable. That does work, but not until you have the experience under your belt first. Like, seriously, if you're starting out and you've tried to write a novel before, or you've written one or two, you get a sense of what's required, and writing by the seat of your pants is not for you. Like, if you're starting out, you need to plan more and more and more. Like, once you've got the experience, you can go ahead and do a lot more by the seat of your pants because you know intuitively what needs to happen. And so it can work at that point. But the truth is, when you're starting out, when you're an aspiring novelist, your goals should be first and foremost to learn the craft and to write a great story. So these are things like determining a basic storytelling structure that always works, something that's proven. And there are several structures you can choose from. The one I like the most is the quest. And why? Because it's been around for thousands of years. It's moved from the oral tradition to the written tradition to film and TV and so on. It works. It's proven, and we love it. So that's the one that I promote in my coaching. But also, you need to learn how to create characters that readers will relate to. And the thing is, you don't need to create unique characters. This is a myth. Stop trying to create something that's, that's so unique that no one recognizes anything. We like character types. We like archetypes. We like those swashbuckling captains that are mavericks, and that the heroes and the villains and all of those sorts of things. We like those. We come to expect to see those in stories. So why disappoint your reader by putting in, some character that's so crazy that it just doesn't relate to any reader? We'll stop doing that. You also need to learn about plotting points and pacing and tension and, throwing obstacles in front of your characters to make them work for their goals. And in the way that I like to teach writing, mapping out exactly what happens in each scene or chapter before you ever begin writing, so that before you sit down at the kitchen table and open up the laptop and go chapter 1, you've already mapped out your story. You know what's going to happen, so you can remove that burden of always trying to figure out what might happen next. You already know. And now there's more to it than just that, right? That's kind of the planning aspect of things, but there's a testing aspect of things as well, which I'll talk to in a second, because it will take you upwards of 500 hours to write and revise a 75,000-word novel. That is a lot of time. But if you think about what Malcolm Gladwell says about, requiring 10,000 hours to become an expert at your craft, that relates to about 20 novels. So before you can become really, really good at writing novels, you've got to write 10 to 20 novels just to get really good at your craft. That's a commitment. That's a lot. I can show you how to do that a little bit sooner than that. But but that's the idea, that these things take time. So your first novel, in fact, your first few novels, are essentially a sandbox where you are learning the craft. So let's stop insisting that they all become bestsellers. They won't. So let's just focus on having fun and learning the craft and allowing ourselves to enjoy the process as we go. So the counterintuitive approach is all about this. The time for writing by the seat of your pants is after you learn the basics of writing and storytelling. So where do you start then with this planning and the testing, and what does that actually look like? So are you going to be spending all your time just thinking about your story, or are you actually going to start writing it? Well, we will be writing it, no question. But before we just sit down and race into it, let's plan and test things as we go. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of how-to books on this stuff, right? You know, there's the garden growing and the snowflake method, and there's saving cats. There's the one-year novelist. There are 30-day novelists. There's a write a novel in 11 steps. There's write a novel in 20 steps. There's all kinds of ways to write a novel. And for most of us, you know, we'll pick up a couple of books, we'll look at some YouTube videos, and then we say, oh, okay, I kind of get this, and or else, oh, that sounds like a lot of work. I just want to write. So off we go and we write, and inevitably run into the roadblocks that I've talked about before. So the counterintuitive approach then that I follow is an approach that's actually borrowed from the project management world. So if you've spent any time in project management or software development or construction where you're following blueprints to build a house, you will understand this. It's called an agile process, and this is the way that software gets developed. You probably know this, or you've at least encountered this when you see, you know, app version 1.0 goes out and it's got bugs in it and people give feedback and then it gets fixed, and then eventually version 2.0 comes out. And it's the same thing with any kind of video game or computer game that comes out as well. It's the same idea. A version goes out, there are bugs that people find, and then it gets tweaked, and then it gets improved, and out it goes again. And this is actually this step-by-step process is called an agile process. And we use the same thing in the writing. In other words, we are constantly testing our ideas as we work our way through the planning and the writing process in order to make the story better. So this is why writing in a group becomes so effective. You're constantly getting feedback on your work, so you can consistently improve your story. So just as an example, let's take story ideas as an example. So usually this is the first step in the novel writing process, right? Like writers come to me, they've got an idea for a story and they want some help on how to turn this into a novel. So when I ask if they've tested this idea with actual readers, I often get the, you know, that kind of thing. No, because the writers haven't thought about that. They've just come up with an idea that they think is going to be really cool. So here's the truth, though. If you haven't asked others, especially readers in that genre, what they think about your story idea, how will you know if it's ever going to work or not? How will you know if it resonates with them or not? You don't. So then you're guessing. And quite often what happens is, you know, for those trying to write on their own and they come up with their idea and they've got their characters and they plow through the process only to, you know, put their book out on Amazon only to find that no one reads it. Why is that? Well, it's really disappointing, of course, when that happens. But the reason why that's occurred is because there hasn't been any validation along the way. So if you're just writing for yourself or your friends or family, that's fine. That's one thing. But if you actually want to sell your book to strangers, which I think most of us actually do, then it becomes critical to test your ideas as you're going along to make sure that your story is resonating. So let's take an example. Let's do this, a story idea blitz. So in the workshops and coaching sessions that I run, this is an exercise that we do. Like for 10 minutes, for 10 minutes, write down as many story ideas as you can. And keep doing this until you have at least 20. So to come up, like you might be thinking 20 story ideas. Holy crap, I can't even come up with 2. So no, you can. You just keep going until you've got at least 20. Now, these ideas don't have to all be best-selling type ideas. Just write whatever comes into your head. Make things up. Make them funny. Make them crazy. Make them interesting. The good, the bad, the ugly doesn't matter. At this point, quantity is more important than the quality. So you don't want to overthink this. You just want to write. Just go nuts. And if you're looking for ideas, there's a million ideas in the news. Just find something that looks really weird, like headlines, crazy headlines. I love headlines because you get really interesting ones, and you get new ones every day. So I look for headlines and then ask myself, well, what if? Or suppose this happened, and there's an idea for a story. So don't overthink. If you worry what others might think about your ideas, that doesn't matter either. Write them down anyway. And even if you think your idea is rubbish, just write it down. Like it's quantity at this point, not quality. All right, now once you have those, say, 20 ideas, what do you do with them? Well, this is where it gets a little bit interesting. What I'd like you to do is to actually share them with friends and readers and trusted writers in that genre. Like, there's no point in asking me, I've mentioned this before in the podcast, there's no point in asking me to evaluate ideas or validate ideas in historical romance fiction, because I'm not there. I don't read that, so I don't know what's a good idea. So you want to make sure that you're validating your ideas with people who actually understand the genre. So if you're a fantasy writer, talk to fantasy people. If you're a Western writer, talk to Western people. These are who you want to share your ideas with. Now, I know this can get scary, especially if you've written down some crazy ideas. This can get scary, and, people might laugh at you and so on and so forth, but please, trust me, it doesn't matter. You're going to ask them, which of these ideas resonate with you? Which of these story ideas would you like to see developed into a novel? And they will pick a few. So, like you might want to make sure you say, well, only pick your top 3 or 4, something like that. And then you gather up all of that feedback, and you see where those readers and friends of yours are coming together and saying, oh yeah, it was number 6 that I really liked. Number 6 did it for me. Number 8 was okay too, and number 16 was not too bad. But that number 6, oh my goodness, that's the one. And so that's what you're looking for. You're looking for those ideas that resonate with readers before you ever get started. And so now you know that once you write that story, once you develop that idea into a full-length novel, you are already going to have people interested in reading it. Already. So my goodness, how cool is that, to minimize the risk of spending 500 hours writing a novel that no one reads? If you do this, if you just spend a bit of time validating your ideas, you can avoid a lot of misery later on. So this is an example of how the counterintuitive process works for writing. And it's constantly doing this. It's testing, and planning. And as you've got it, once it comes together, then you can start the writing. The testing, of course, doesn't end there. You're going to be testing chapters with readers as well. But that comes later. At least this gives you an idea, I hope, of what the counterintuitive process is all about. So if that's something you'd like to learn more, just drop me a line. I'd love to share some stuff with you and have a chat. And until then, of course, keep writing, and I'll talk to you soon.